Good morning and welcome to Book Break with Greece Public Library. I'm Kirstra. I'm one of the librarians here. I moderate our Pints and Prose book discussion group, and I am joined, as always, by my colleague, Claire.
Hi, everybody. I'm Claire. I do the Historical Fiction Book Club on Facebook and also As the Page Turns here at the library.
Excellent. And today we are just going to be doing a roundup of books that we've been reading recently, no particular theme. Do you want to start us off, Claire?
Oh, sure. I actually had some really good ones this time. I haven't had 5-star reads in a while, and I have 2 this time. So my first one is called When the Stars Go Dark by Paula McLean. And most people might be familiar with her as writing historical fiction. She wrote the books about Hemingway's The Paris Wife, and there was another one too. But this one was very different for her. It is a mystery. It's based a lot on her own personal experience, which you read a lot about that in the author's notes. But I really thought it was really, really good. It kept me riveted. It's a book about missing girls, sexual abuse, more the effects and not so much like delving into the actual abuse, and the detective that tries to find a missing girl and also have some healing in her own life. So Anna Hart is a missing persons detective in San Francisco. When the book opens, you know that she's had tragedy in her personal life, but you don't exactly know what happened. But she is fleeing. Her husband has asked her to leave. Things are breaking down. So she is desperate and numb. She goes back to the town where she grew up in Northern California. It's the village of Mendocino. And she's there to grieve and just try to get her head together. She lived there as a child with her foster family, and it was a very good foster placement. That is where she really felt the most at home. She learned to love nature and the outdoors. But once she arrived, she learns that a local teenage girl has gone missing. And the crime feels very reminiscent of a teenage girl that went missing when she was growing up there. So she feels compelled. The sheriff is now the son of the man that was sheriff before, and she starts kind of working unofficially on the case with him, but all the while trying to sort through her own emotional baggage. So it takes you into, trauma therapy, what goes on in a case of missing persons, um, and just how to reclaim your life and reclaim faith in other people. So I thought it was really good. 5 stars from me.
Nice. Yeah, that one's been on my list. I haven't read any of her other books, but that one sounds so intriguing.
Yeah, I'd lend you my copy, but one of my daughters has it now. So.
No worries at all. I have several of your books still at my home, so I'll get through those and we'll see where we are. Well, I have also a mystery, so I'll go ahead and talk about that one next. So that is The Sanitarium by Sarah Pierce. So this is one that, well, it's a Reese's book club, so it's not like I am particularly in the know, but it's been on my radar for a while. My hold came in, so I got a chance to read it. So this one, the main character is Ellen. She is a cop in the UK, but she is on leave. We find out pretty quickly, like she's been on leave for almost a year after an investigation went badly. And we kind of find out bits and pieces about that along the way. But she and her boyfriend are in Switzerland for her brother's engagement. His fiance works at this very posh, swanky hotel in a renovated sanitarium, hence the title. So they go to the hotel for the engagement party weekend kind of thing. We also find out that Ellen and her brother are estranged, or they at least have a strained relationship after some childhood traumatic experiences that, again, we get in sort of bits and pieces along the way. And Ellen is a mess. Like, she is kind of prone to panic attacks, and she's always like freaking out, and she and her boyfriend are having kind of some issues. So that this is partly engagement weekend, partly like a let's try and work it out weekend. And almost as soon as they arrive, a monster snowstorm descends on the Alps, and they are like almost immediately cut off. So most of the hotel is evacuated, but the last bus isn't able to leave. So of course, Ellen and her brother and his fiance and like all of the important people were going to be on that last bus. So they're all stranded at this hotel. And then dead bodies start turning up. So because they are completely cut off up in this remote hotel in the like tippy top of the Alps, there's no way for the police to get to them. So Ellen, of course, starts sort of doing her own investigation in conjunction with the Swiss police, which is kind of its whole logistical thing. But she starts doing investigation. And I don't want to give any bits and pieces away. There are several red herrings. There are several close scrapes. And what is interesting is the way sort of the history of the sanitarium and of sanitariums like it is woven in through the plot. So this is a place where TB patients were sent in like the Victorian period, more or less, because the mountain air was supposed to be good for their lungs. So it was a good mystery. I won't say it was great. It was good. It was like a solid B+. It definitely sets up at the end for additional books, like in a series featuring the same lead character, in kind of a clunky way. Like, I didn't love the little epilogue. I was like, we could have just let that go. But it is definitely atmospheric. So like this summer, when you are just wishing for a snowstorm, you can read about the sanitarium and a mystery set during all of the falling snow, all of the snow.
You know, it's funny. My hold for that just came in.
Did it?
I've also been waiting for it. It sounds very much like One by One. I mean, it's like all of a sudden all these authors are like, hey, let's do a murder mystery set in the Alps this year where people are cut off, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's another one too that
is there really
has a similar setting. So yeah.
And I didn't read One by One, but yeah, it does sound like there's some thematic overlap there.
Yeah. All right. Well, my next one is a historical fiction that I read for As the Page Turns called The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. This one took me a while to kind of get into in the beginning, but once I became engrossed in these characters, I found it hard to put it down. It was a great book discussion choice. We had a lot of great discussion about this book. It is set on a Korean island of Jeju, and there are women that actually dive to capture seafood and sea urchins and seaweed and all kinds of things. And the men watch the children. So it's kind of a matriarchal society in a little bit, a reversal of normal. And they're kind of on their own. So, and this has a lot of historical context in it. You learn about Japanese colonialism, some of the things that happened, and then, you know, World War II, and then when the Korean War and the split and the Americans. And so you're going right from the era of pre-war and the families and the divers to what modern life is doing. And also there's very much a theme of these two women that become friends, one of whom, her mom is like one of the lead divers, and the other girl that she becomes friends with, her father was a Japanese collaborator, so pretty much shunned by the village, and only when her mother takes her in and begins training her is she accepted, and the two become best friends, but then have a falling out over a pretty awful event. What I didn't know about a lot of this history, I feel kind of guilty about that. So it was really good. You become drawn into it, and it's not so like typical happy ending.
Mhm.
Like these two friends don't ever really, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a lot of bitterness and anger held by these characters. One is more willing to concede, but the other one she just can't, you know. Um, and their families do intertwine. So it's like I said, I
Hmm.
don't want to give too much away, but I thought it was fascinating. And Lisa C, in my opinion, she gives you some really good characters, well fleshed out characters that you can relate to because they're not perfect people.
Mhm.
They all have their faults, but I learned a lot about history. I became engrossed in the story of these two women, and their families, and I just thought it was a really good read. If you like historical books, I'd highly recommend this one. So
Nice. Yeah, I don't think I've actually ever read any Lisa C.
yeah,
But she's
I
got
read
some very
the
good ones.
Snowflower and the Secret Fan
Hmm.
and the Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. I
Hmm.
liked both of those.
Yeah,
So
nice.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, I also have a historical fiction, so I'll talk about that next. And that is The Cold Millions by Jess Walter,
Okay.
which I really liked. So this one is set in like around 1910. It follows Rye and Gig Dolan. So they are brothers who grew up in the Mountain West. Gig is the older brother. He has left home, and Rye leaves home when his mother dies, leaving him orphaned at 15, 16. So he heads west to try and find Gig because Gig is his only remaining family. So they wind up in Spokane, Washington, in the middle of a big labor dispute. So Gig has gotten involved in some labor activism, some unionism, um, and that sort of propels all of the rest of the action that happens in the book. Um, it's a good book. The characters are super interesting. There are, so Gig and Rye are the two main characters, and Rye more so even than Gig. But there are lots of little side characters, and a lot of them get like their own chapter. So you get like a little digression finding out sort of how they came to Spokane, sometimes what happens to them after, like there could be little flash forwards. But it's really interesting because you get all of these different perspectives of the time. So one is like a vaudeville performer
Mhm.
who ends up in Spokane, and one is like a former Pinkerton. So there's lots of like political machinations behind the scenes. And it takes most of the book before you figure out how everything is actually interrelated, but everything does kind of come together at the end, which is very satisfying. There are no like truly good people in this book. Like it's very much a book of shades of gray. It had, to me, kind of the feel of the TV show Deadwood, which is set in like a frontier town earlier, probably like 50 years earlier. So imagine Deadwood like kind of industrializing and
Okay.
a little bit later. So, but that kind of feel still kind of the Wild West
Oh, that sounds good.
in a town. Yeah, it is good. I really liked it. It was kind of an interesting perspective shift. I read it almost right after I read The Four Winds, which also has like that labor component,
Hmm.
and sort of small people standing up against like a huge machine. Um, and the title actually refers to essentially all of the people like Rye and Gig who are left out in the cold millions who don't have, the wealth and the power. Um, so yeah, it was really good. Different than what I usually read, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I think I read Beautiful Ruins by her, which
Mhm.
was also good.
Nice.
So yeah, that one's been on my list. Just haven't gotten there yet. So
Yeah, it was good. For what it's worth, I listened to that one on audio and it was really good. Like some of the different characters get different narrators. It was good.
good. All right. The last one I'm going to talk about is The Last Thing He Told Me. Also a Reese's pick, Laura Davies. Laura Dave. She wrote 800 Grapes and something else, which was pretty popular. I remember that. But this is my first book by her. So the premise of this book is Hannah is the main character. She's kind of older artist, and she ends up falling in love and marrying a guy named Owen Michaels. But a year after they're married and living this happy life on a houseboat, I believe in San Francisco, he disappears, and the only thing she receives is someone gives her a note, and it says "protect her." And Owen has a teenage daughter. So she kind of figures out that she's the one she's supposed to protect. She knows nothing about, why he disappeared. And the daughter finds, I believe, a duffel bag with $600,000 cash in her locker from her father. So they start on an adventure trying to piece. Oh, and the next day they're visited by, I believe, a Texas Ranger. It was some form of government that shouldn't have been there, that was not in, jurisdiction. He's a U.S. Marshal. And FBI agents arrive. The company that Owen was working for is being investigated for fraud and other horrible things. So she really has no idea what to think. Is he a fraudster? She just can't get rid of the impression that he wasn't, that he was on the up and up. But so she decides to go, since this person was from Texas that visited her initially, she decides to go back, and she's trying to get the teenage daughter to remember anything about her mom that died, their life before, so the two of them are trying to figure out what happened to him. So this really caused Claire's implausibility meter to go off the charts, which, I couldn't stop reading, but at the same time, I hate when I do this. I'm reading it going, this would never happen. How is she going to get on a plane? Your husband is gone. This company is, major fraud, other people being led away, and you're just going to be able to travel with his daughter, all over the place. And, and you don't even know legally, like, would she have been allowed to take his daughter? Like, were there other so yeah, that was my main problem with the book. Now, my daughter in Maryland, this was our like mother-daughter read last month, and she liked it. I liked it too. And like I said, it kept me engaged. It was very entertaining, but I could poke holes
Poking
all
holes in
day.
it.
Yeah. And it was, kind of a expected ending. I'll say that. I don't want to blow it, but yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Interesting.
Cool. Well, my last one is a debut. It is Lakewood by Megan Giddings. And this book defies genre a little bit. Like some places call it a thriller. I saw one review refer to it as a medical thriller, which I think is maybe a little too far. But the setup is that our main character, Lena, is a college student in Michigan. At the very beginning of the book, her grandmother has just died. And we find out very shortly that her grandmother is really the one who raised her. And her mother is around, but has just a host of medical issues and problems. So was not really able to care for Lena as she was growing up. So now that her grandmother is dead, Lena has sort of inherited responsibility for her mother, who isn't really able to work, still has a lot of medical expenses. So she's trying to sort of figure out how she's going to pay all of her mother's medical bills, the bills from the funeral, all of this stuff. And an envelope shows up at her house, inviting her to participate in a study. And there's not a lot of information about what that study entails, but it's a company called Lakewood, in Lakewood, Michigan. So they're set in rural Michigan. And there are some hints that it's like sort of maybe not a government program, but has ties to the government. And, you know, you'll be helping your country by signing up for this study. But what they do is they pay incredibly well. They set you up in an apartment. You have to live in Lakewood near the research facility. They give you a cover job because no one can know what is actually happening, like what you're actually being paid for. So Lena, you know, after some back and forth, ends up signing up for this. The money's just too good to pass up. And then the rest of the book sort of takes off. It's her experience in Lakewood being part of these studies. So some of you never really get a clear sense of what is being studied. But there's like one section where they give her eye drops and her eyes turn from brown to blue. And like, there's, you know, a whole thing about this. And then, you know, sometimes they just have to take a pill and then we'll see what happens later, you know, so they don't get any information. And then in between studies, they're working at this sort of fake warehouse job where they just sit at computers and like pretend to work in an office all day. So there's sort of these weird sections of like what is going on, medical stuff that are like a little iffy, and then just punctuated with this incredible boredom and tedium of this fake office job. So I don't want to get into any more detail than that because I think it would spoil some of the reveals. But it's a very moody book. Like there's not necessarily a ton of plot. But the tension does build through the book. And so some places called it sort of a cross between The Handmaid's Tale and The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which I wouldn't go full Handmaid's Tale on this. Like there's definitely some like exploitation of vulnerability happening. And a little bit of like preying of the powerful on those without power. But it's definitely not like a full dystopia. But like I said, it's kind of genre defying, but very moody and definitely interesting. And it kept me turning the pages right up until the very end. And I will say, so unlike I talked about When No One Is Watching, I think last time, which just like turned into like a bonkers roller coaster at the end, there's no like bonkersness in this book. Like everything is very finely controlled right up until the very end, which I appreciated because I think that takes a lot of skill from an author to like keep a firm hold on those reins. But she did, and the ending is also very satisfying. So it's a debut I would highly recommend, and I'm going to be looking for more books from this author.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So we will be back in 2 weeks. I think that's all we had today, right, Claire?
Yeah. That's why 3.
Cool. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, and it will be time for our Stack of Shame edition for 2021. So I'm going to have to narrow down my Stack of Shame to a pile that I can actually carry out here for recording purposes.
I know. I've got quite the stack of shame going, so it's almost embarrassing, but
yeah,
I'm going to share my shame with everyone.
Exactly. So we will see you on the 16th for Stack of Shame. And until then, let us know in the comments if you've read any of these books that we talked about today or what else you've been reading that you would recommend. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Take care.